This video lesson is an introduction to the folk art of wax resist egg dyeing. You can use the same technique on fabric for batik dyeing. One of the first things you want to do is select and wash your eggs. You can use a vegetable wash, a hand soap, or even just a bar of soap, but one of the most important tools is going to be a little scrub brush like a nail brush. When you're selecting your eggs, you'll find that brown eggs have a smoother outer surface usually. They're less matte in color and they are often very shiny. That makes them easy to clean, but harder to dye. The darker your eggs, the shinier the outside will be usually. Darker eggs are easier to wash, and you can use harsher soap such as bar soap or a regular hand or dish soap on them. Get it wet. Look around for any particles that might be on there and scrub those off with your nail brush. White eggs often have a more matte look to them, which means they're porous, which is why I like using a vegetable wash with those. The vegetable wash is a little bit safer should any of the egg absorb the soap. If you're going to be hard boiling eggs, I suggest that you do this washing prior to boiling them. It just makes cleaner eggs. If you're going to go straight to dyeing them, it just makes sure that they're clean before they even get boiled. If you dye them after hard boiling them, you don't get to keep your designs. So I'm going to show you how to blow an egg. The tools you need are something sharp like a paring knife that's got a hard metal tip, a long toothpick or skewer, and something to receive the blown out egg. Take one of your eggs, grab your sharp metal implement, and what you're going to do is just tap at the very same spot over and over and over again until you crack open the shell. It's like a baby bird's beak, just tapping at it until you get a tiny little hole big enough for your skewer or toothpick to go inside. Go to the opposite end and make another hole, just tapping it until it's the right size. One end should be slightly bigger than the other. The one that's bigger is where all the juicy insides are going to exit the egg. When you insert your skewer or toothpick, you're going to want to swizzle it around and scramble it all up as best as you can so that it's easier to blow it out.
A lot has changed since I recorded the video and those first pieces of audio for this instructional video. We are now living in an era of COVID-19 where we're sheltering in place with our families, our kids are present, and seeing me blowing on this egg with my mouth, blowing my breath into the egg, could creep people out. If this is eggs for your own family, you're probably already breathing on your family and around them in close quarters, so anything that you have, they have, and vice versa. But if you want to have your kids blow out their own eggs, and then they can have their own separate container of scrambled eggs to make scrambled eggs, or a special batch of cookies that is just their cookies, you can choose to do that. You can also just throw out the blown out egg afterwards. But if it's just you in your house eating eggs by yourself, you're probably okay eating the eggs that you blew out. Now, I also like to wash out my eggs once I'm done blowing them out. I will blow out the shells, and then all of the shells that I've blown out, I run water over them and through them to wash out any extra egg, because I don't want any egg residue to dry on there, causing dyeing problems later. So whatever you do with the blown out egg, that's your choice. A lot of people would probably find it safer to just hard boil the eggs and dye them instead of going through the step of blowing out the eggshells. But if you do that, you don't get to keep your beautiful works of art at the end. Now, by messing the audio up by recording some new stuff, I'm a little bit off timing on the video, so I'm just going to repeat this part. Old eggs, young eggs, brown eggs, white eggs. I find that older eggs don't have as strong membranes on the inside and are a little bit more watery and therefore easier to blow out. When it comes to brown eggs or white eggs, brown eggs will give you a deeper, darker color, but you also won't get as high a contrast when you're trying to get a bright white or a bright yellow. In fact, most brown eggs don't take yellow at all. You have to go straight to red, blue, purple and green to get anything happening on a brown egg. And when it comes to the color of the yolks, that really just depends on what the chicken was eating. Both of these eggs that I blew out were free-range chickens, but you can see one is a very light yellow and the other one is a dark yellow. So one of those chickens had more exposure to sunlight, more exposure to eating wild insects and wild grains, and the other one may have been cage-free, but it could have been in a barn a lot or just a winter chicken and not getting as much sunlight. So when it comes to which type of eggs, I prefer older ones, white ones when I'm trying to get bright colors, and brown ones when I'm trying to get something dark and dramatic. I have some varietal eggs here. One of these is a chicken, one is a duck, and it's hard to tell when you get the extra large eggs from chickens, but the whiter one was a chicken. This one is actually a brown egg, but it's so light a brown, it could be mistaken for a white egg. I love varietal chicken eggs. You can have Americana eggs that come in a variety from olive to almost a robin's egg blue. Browns come in all shades of brown. Some will be speckled. Some will be more matte in color. Some will be speckled with light spots. Some will be speckled with dark spots. I have an oddball here that's more of a circular egg than an egg shape, and I just love getting interesting eggs from all of my local friends that have chickens. Every once in a while you'll get an egg that kind of looks like the chicken ran out of printer toner, and those are always kind of fun to dye with, but they're going to be a little bit different. Sometimes I'll just blow out eggs and have them in a little arrangement like this. They look beautiful like this when you've got a multitude of colors, and that's totally fine, but I'm going to show you how to dye them using spots of wax to make a design, and then after repeatedly rubbing dye on them, you get this layered coloring of your eggs. And if you start with a blue egg or a brown egg, you're going to have a slightly different look than if you start with a white or a cream colored egg. We're going to want some safety equipment when we're doing this. We're going to need some rubber gloves or latex gloves, some cotton balls. You're going to want to lay down a tarp or some sort of plastic thing if you don't have dye resistant countertops. I've got stainless steel. I've put all of my dye into little cups and I've dissolved the tablets in those cups. I didn't mention paper towels. Yeah, have paper towels. Last of all, you're going to need a container to melt some wax in. I found these little fondue pots at the thrift store, and so I just put some wax in those. You can get the pellet style wax for making the wax sand candles. Those are a really good choice for doing these sort of projects. Oh, and you're going to want a paintbrush or Q-tips for putting that wax onto your eggs. That's another piece of what you need. You get an egg and you just put a few dots onto the egg. I will sometimes do a random design, sometimes I'll do a more geometric design. This one, I'm just kind of doing sort of a starburst. And that means that whatever the base color of my egg is will remain even after I put my first color dye. Now the first color I like to put on my eggs is usually yellow, unless I'm working with a brown egg, in which case I have to immediately go darker. But if I start off with a white egg or a light blue egg, or even a very light cream brown egg, I will begin with yellow. Once you put a darker color on there, you can't get lighter. So you start with the lightest color that you have, which could be the white of your egg or the light blue of your egg. And then you add yellow over that. After yellow, you can either go orange or a light green. Once you've hit orange or light green, you can then go to a red or a darker blue-green. Once you've hit red or a darker blue-green, you can go to more of a purple or a purpley blue, and then the last color would be purple. I started with yellow on this white egg, and then I went to orange. And between the yellow step and the orange step, I dried my egg off with my paper towel. I noticed when I put the orange on that it didn't seem to be doing much. It seemed to do a little bit. I know it looks really dramatic in the film, but as soon as you see it when it's dried, you'll notice that there's not a huge difference between the yellow and the orange. So I'm glad that I then switched over to red over the top. You'll see briefly how that looks before I go to the next thing. As you add on more and more colors, see how pale that orange turned out? The more and more colors that you add on, the darker and more intense the egg that remains uncovered with wax is. Now this process takes a long time, between keeping your wax hot, dipping it onto your egg, covering your egg with a new color, drying it off. You're going to have people in your household walk through the kitchen because they're going to get hungry. And this does take a long time. So I'm going to just speed up and get to the end of all of the eggs that I made. I only made 4 in this particular film. So after you've done multiple coatings of wax and dye, you're going to have your eggs just hanging out. How it's going to look is there's going to be a bumpy texture, and that's the wax underneath. What you're going to do is you're going to take a hairdryer and you're going to blow on your eggs to melt off that waxy texture. Now, because the eggs are hollow, they're going to want to run away. So get your paper towel, maybe keep your gloves on if they're not too stained, and just blow on those eggs, gently rubbing them with the paper towel to rub off wax. This is going to give a nice shiny look. It's almost like a polish. And you just have to make sure that you're rubbing enough wax off that it has that light sheen without waxy bumps. And that's my better late than never wax resist egg dyeing. You'll notice that I used concentrated dye. You can use food dye direct from those little squeeze bottles if you want to. I just happen to have some of the dye tablets. Some people like to use the paste style food dye that you can use for cakes. You can actually paint that on with a paintbrush for more intricate designs. There's a whole lot of ways of doing this. This is just one way, and it's the easiest way that I found. It's a great introduction project to doing resist dyeing. If you ever want to try this with clothing, you can. And yes, food dye does dye clothing, particularly 100% cotton. You can do this with your kids, and instead of using hot wax, you can use school glue. Just regular white school glue on clothing, and when you launder it, the glue dissolves in the laundry. It's harder to use glue on eggs because then you have to soak the eggs overnight, and it gets quite to be a sticky mess. But this is another thing that you can do with your kids at home when you're all cooped up inside. Thank you very much for joining me. Stay crafty.